A widow confronts a stranger kneeling at her husband's grave, and what he reveals will unravel everything she thought she knew about the man she married. One hidden act of kindness, one impossible secret, one child who only lived because of it. If this story moves you, hit like right now. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And follow all the way to the end, because what these two discover together will change far more than just their own lives. The cemetery on the east side of Millfield was not a place most people chose to visit twice. It sat behind a rusted iron gate on the corner of Prater Avenue and 6th, squeezed between a car wash that had been closed for 3 years and a strip of overgrown grass that the city maintenance crew kept promising to deal with. The graves were old on the west side, the headstones tilting at angles that made them look tired, and newer on the east side, the polished granite still holding its shine in the afternoon light. There were no fountains, no decorative benches, just flat ground, narrow gravel paths, and the kind of silence that did not feel peaceful so much as it felt heavy. Landon Hayes came here every month. He had been coming for 2 years. He always brought Milo because he had decided early on that Milo should know, that Milo should understand when he was old enough to carry it properly, exactly why the two of them made this drive on the first Sunday of every month, parked the truck on the street outside, and walked through that rusted gate carrying a small bundle of whatever flowers were on sale at the grocery store near their apartment. Not expensive flowers. Never expensive flowers. That was not something Landon could afford, and he had long since stopped being embarrassed about what he could and could not afford. The flowers were whatever was left in the bucket near the checkout lane. Carnations usually, sometimes a few stems of something yellow that Milo liked because he said they looked cheerful. Milo was 8 years old. He had his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and he ran slightly ahead of Landon on the gravel path the way he always did, his sneakers crunching with each step, his small fist wrapped around the stems of today's flowers, which were white carnations with a few sprigs of eucalyptus that the woman at the register had tucked in for free because Milo had smiled at her. "I remember where it is," Milo said without looking back. "I know you do." "You don't have to walk so close." "I'm not walking close. This path is just narrow." Milo glanced back at him with a look that said he did not believe this. Landon almost smiled. The grave they visited was in the northeast corner, set slightly apart from the others by a small ornamental hedge that someone kept trimmed. The headstone was dark gray granite, simple but clearly expensive, with clean carved letters that had not faded the way the older ones had. Marcus Sterling, 1979 to 2022. Husband, builder, dreamer. Landon stopped a few feet back while Milo crouched down and placed the carnations carefully against the base of the stone, the way they always did. The boy was quiet for a moment. He did this every time, this small, serious pause, and Landon never rushed him through it. "Hi," Milo said to the stone. "It's us again." He said it the way you'd say it to a neighbor you'd known your whole life. Easy, comfortable, no self-consciousness about it at all. Landon looked at the headstone, Marcus Sterling. He had never met Marcus Sterling. He did not know what the man's voice sounded like, or whether he laughed loudly or quietly, or what he ordered when he sat down at a restaurant. What Landon knew was written on a single piece of paper that he kept folded in the back of his wallet, behind his driver's license, where he had been keeping it for 2 years. What Landon knew was that his son was standing here in a cemetery on a Sunday afternoon arguing with his father about personal space on a gravel path, talking easily to a headstone, alive, and that the man buried in front of them was the reason for all of it. That was enough to come back for. "I got 100 on my math test," Milo told the stone. "Dad said I could get pizza, but I wanted burritos, so we got burritos. Dad had 2, which is why he's not allowed to say anything about my second helping anymore." That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. Landon crouched down beside his son. He did not say anything elaborate. He never did. He just looked at the headstone for a long moment and said quietly, "We're okay. Both of us. Thanks to you." That was the whole ritual. Start to finish, it took maybe 10 minutes. Then they would walk back to the truck, and Milo would ask about stopping for ice cream, and the afternoon would go on the way afternoons did. Normal. Unremarkable. Exactly the kind of afternoon that Landon, 2.5 years ago, had been terrified his son would never see. He was standing up, brushing gravel dust from his knee, when he heard the footsteps behind him. Not on the gravel path. Off to the side, on the grass, moving quickly. He turned. The woman was maybe 30. She was dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal blazer that looked like it had not been bought at any store Landon had ever walked into. Her hair was pulled back, dark and precise, and her face was the kind of face that looked like it had spent years learning how to show very little of what was happening underneath it. She walked with the particular confidence of someone who was almost never told no, and right now she was walking directly toward them with an expression that was several degrees past irritated and heading rapidly toward something else. She stopped about 6 feet away. Her eyes went from the headstone to Milo to Landon, and then they snagged on something. Landon watched her gaze drop to his left wrist. He was wearing a watch. It was not the kind of watch someone in his position would normally wear. Not with a 3-year-old truck with a cracked dashboard and a studio apartment in a building where the elevator worked about 60% of the time. It was a slim, silver-faced watch with a dark leather band, understated but clearly well made, and on the back of the case, if you took it off and looked, there were 3 initials engraved in a small serif font. M.A.S. Marcus Allen Sterling. The woman's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice was even, controlled, but there was something running underneath it that was not controlled at all. Landon straightened up fully. Milo had gone quiet beside him, pressing slightly closer without being asked, the way he did when he picked up on something his father hadn't explained yet. "My name is Landon Hayes," Landon said. "This is my son Milo. Why are you at this grave?" "We come every month." Something shifted in her expression. Not softer, sharper. "Every month," she repeated. "Yes." Her eyes went back to the watch. She stared at it the way someone stares at an object they recognize in a place it has absolutely no business being. "Where did you get that?" she said. Landon did not flinch. He had known, in the abstract, that this moment might eventually come. He had spent 2 years visiting this grave without running into anyone. He had started to think, in the way people think about things they are not ready to face, that it might just stay that way forever. He had been wrong. "It was given to me," he said. "Given to you." Her voice was flat. "That watch belonged to my husband." The air between them changed. Milo looked up at his father. Landon kept his eyes on the woman. "You're Vivian Sterling," he said. "Yes." She took one step closer. "And I want to know why a man I have never seen before in my life is standing at my husband's grave with his watch on his wrist." She said it quietly. That was almost worse than if she had raised her voice. There was a restraint to it that made clear she was holding something back, and what she was holding back was not small. Landon glanced down at Milo. "Hey, bud, you remember where the bench is? The one near the gate?" "By the old tree." "Yeah, can you go sit there for a few minutes?" Milo looked between his father and the woman. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Take your phone. I'll be right there." Milo hesitated for one beat, that stubborn chin going slightly forward. And then he took the phone Landon held out, turned, and walked back up the path, casting one look back before he rounded the hedge. Vivian Sterling watched the boy go. Landon watched her watching him. And he saw something cross her face, something quick and complicated. Before the controlled expression came back down like a shade. "Talk," she said. Landon took a breath. He had rehearsed this. He had not rehearsed this. He had imagined versions of this conversation at 2 a.m. when he could not sleep, had played out different ways it might go, and not one version of it had felt like enough. 2.5 years ago, he said, my son was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. That means his heart wall was thickening. He was 6 years old and the left ventricle was already showing abnormal pressure. His cardiologist told me that if he didn't have surgery within 8 to 10 months, the odds shifted in the wrong direction very fast. He paused. I was working 2 jobs. I had insurance, but not the kind that covered what he needed. The gap between what I had and what the surgery cost it wasn't closable. Not by me. Not in that amount of time. Vivian said nothing. She was watching him. I applied everywhere. every assistance program, every grant, every foundation I could find. Most of them had waiting lists. The ones that didn't had criteria I didn't meet, or they covered a different type of procedure, or they'd already exhausted their funding for the year. He stopped. I was out of options. I'm not telling you that to make it sound dramatic. I'm telling you because I need you to understand what it meant when the hospital called me. What hospital? Millfield General, the cardiac wing. They called me about 3 weeks after I'd submitted the last application I had, which I already knew wasn't going to come through fast enough. The billing office called and said that an anonymous donor had covered the full cost of Milo's surgery. Pre-op, the procedure, post-op, 3 nights in the ICU, follow-up appointments. All of it. Vivian's expression had not changed, but something behind her eyes had. I didn't know who it was, Landon continued. The hospital said the donor had requested complete anonymity. I asked several times. They wouldn't tell me. So I just said thank you, and I took my son to surgery, and I sat in a waiting room for 9 hours, and when they told me it went well, I cried in a hospital bathroom for about 15 minutes, and then I went and held my son's hand. He let that sit. The watch came about a week later, he said. It was delivered to my apartment. No return address, just a padded envelope with the watch inside and a small note card. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made a copy of it. I still have the original at home. He held it out to her. She did not reach for it immediately. She looked at it. Then she reached out and took it. The handwriting on the card was confident and slightly cramped, the kind of handwriting that moved fast. Vivian stared at it. Her face had gone completely still. You don't know me, and that's all right. I heard about your boy through a friend of a friend who works at the hospital. I know this doesn't fix everything, but I hope it gives him a chance. Take good care of him. That's the only repayment I want. M. The paper shook slightly in her hand. She stopped it from shaking. There was no other name, Landon said, just the initial. But the watch was engraved, and I looked up the initials. It took me a while. I eventually found a mention of Marcus Sterling in a business article. Once I had the name, I found the obituary, and I found where he was buried. And you've been coming here for 2 years. Yes. Vivian looked down at the note card again. Then she looked up. I don't know this handwriting, she said. The words came out flat, like she'd meant to say something else, and this was what landed instead. What? I don't... She stopped, pressed her lips together. I recognize the handwriting. It's his. It's definitely his. But I've never seen this note before. I didn't know about a donation. I didn't know about your son. She looked at Landon directly, and for the first time the composure cracked just slightly at the edges. My husband never told me any of this. The silence that followed was not comfortable. Landon did not know what to say to that. He had not considered in any of his imagined versions of this conversation that she would not know. I'm sorry, he said. I assumed you... No. She shook her head. The composed expression was fighting to come back and mostly succeeding. Don't apologize, it's not... She exhaled. I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning, every detail you know. I've told you what I know. That's all of it. Is it? It was not a question. It was the kind of statement that meant she was not entirely sure she believed him yet, and she was deciding how much that mattered. She looked back at the headstone. Marcus Allen Sterling. The dates. The 3 words someone had chosen to sum up a life. Husband, builder, dreamer. How do I know any of this is true? She said. You don't, Landon said. Not right now, but Milo has a surgical scar. I have the original note card. The hospital has records. He paused. I'm not here for anything. I never tried to find you. I came here because I didn't know how else to say thank you to someone who saved my son's life. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not trying to... I just wanted him to know. Even if he's not. He stopped. I wanted someone to know. Vivian Sterling stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, I want to see the scar. Milo was sitting on the bench near the gate, exactly where Landon had told him to go, kicking his heels against the wooden slats and watching a pigeon investigate something near the base of the fence. He looked up when he heard footsteps. Landon came first. Behind him, at a slight distance, came the woman with the dark blazer. "Milo," Landon said, sitting beside him, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to just say yes or no, okay?" "Okay. Is it all right if I show this woman your scar?" Milo looked at the woman. She was standing a few feet away, and whatever had been in her face back at the grave had shifted into something that Milo, with the unsettling perceptiveness that children sometimes have, seemed to pick up on. He studied her for a moment the way he studied math problems, systematically, without rushing. "Why does she want to see it?" he asked. "Because she needs to believe something I told her." "What did you tell her?" "That it's there." Milo considered this. Then he looked at the woman. "It's from my heart surgery," he told her, with the matter-of-fact directness of a child who has explained this enough times that it no longer embarrasses him. "I was 6. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just looks weird." Vivian Sterling crouched down so she was closer to his eye level. Something happened in her face when she did it, a small, involuntary softening that she clearly did not intend. "What's your favorite subject in school?" she asked. Milo blinked. This was not what he'd expected. "Math," he said, "and lunch." A sound came out of Vivian Sterling that was very close to a laugh but did not quite make it all the way. "Fair enough," she said. Milo pulled his shirt up to just below his collarbone, revealing the scar, pale and slightly raised against his skin, running vertically for several inches, absolutely real. Vivian looked at it. She looked at it for a long time, long enough that Milo glanced at his father with an expression that asked whether this was normal. Then Vivian stood back up. She looked at Landon. "I want you to come to my house," she said. "I'm not sure that's... There are things there. Journals, personal records, things of my husband's that I haven't gone through fully." She stopped, composed herself again. "I think you might need to see some of them, and I think I need someone in the room who knows the context when I do." Landon studied her. She was not a woman who said things she did not mean. He could see that. She was also not a woman who showed much of what she was actually feeling, except that right now she was showing more than she intended to. "Can I bring Milo?" "Of course." Milo dropped his shirt and looked at his father. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked. "Looks like it," Landon said. The drive to the Sterling house took 22 minutes, which Milo spent with his forehead against the truck window watching the neighborhoods change as they moved from the east side through the middle of the city and out toward the area near the reservoir where the houses started getting larger and the spaces between them started growing. He did not ask questions, which usually meant he was storing them up for later. Landon followed the black car Vivian was driving. He had not expected a black car. He had not expected any of this. His hands on the wheel were steady, but his jaw was tight, and he was doing the thing he did when he was in over his head, which was to focus on what was directly in front of him and refuse to think about anything else until he had more information. The Sterling house was not what Landon had imagined, except that it was exactly what he should have imagined. It was a large, gray stone structure set back from the road behind a long driveway lined with young trees, with clean architectural lines that were expensive without being flashy. The kind of house that said money the way a whisper says something, quietly, so that you had to lean in to hear it, which was how you ended up leaning in. There was a housekeeper inside who nodded at Vivian with the practiced neutrality of someone who had learned not to look surprised by anything. Vivian led them through a front hall where the floors were pale hardwood, and the walls held nothing decorative except one large photograph of a coastline, into a sitting room that was furnished in gray and navy and felt both elegant and oddly impersonal. "Sit wherever you like," Vivian said to Milo. "There should be juice in the kitchen if you want it. Elena can get you something." Milo sat on the edge of a gray couch and looked around with careful eyes. "Is this your house?" he asked. "It is. It's very clean." "Milo," Landon said. "It's a compliment," Milo said. Vivian looked at the boy. "Thank you," she said, and she sounded like she meant it, which Milo seemed to decide was acceptable. She turned to Landon. "The study is upstairs. That's where his personal things are. Most of it I moved up there after I wasn't ready to go through it, and then I got busy, and then..." She stopped, started again. "I haven't touched most of it." "You don't have to do this today," Landon said. "We can..." "I want to," she said. It was short. It cut off the rest of what he was going to say. They went upstairs. The study was the kind of room that told you something about a person the moment you walked in. Not in a curated way, boss. It was not a room that had been arranged to impress anyone. It was a room that had been used. The desk was large and wooden and covered in the particular disorganization of someone who knew exactly where everything was. There was a bookshelf that held a mixture of business texts and paperback novels with cracked spines. A cardboard box in the corner still had packing tape on it. On the windowsill, a small succulent in a terracotta pot had died and dried out. Nobody had touched this room in a while. Vivian stood in the doorway for a moment, and Landon stood behind her, and he understood that they were both giving her a second. She walked in. There was a set of shelves to the left that held a row of identical dark green journals, each one labeled on the spine with a year in Marcus Sterling's cramped handwriting. Vivian went to them. She ran one finger along the spines, reading the years. She pulled out the one labeled with the year Milo had his surgery. She sat in the desk chair and opened it. Landon sat in the smaller chair against the wall, the one that was probably meant for guests or for whoever came to discuss things with Marcus Sterling in this room. He did not speak. He looked around at the room while Vivian read. The desk had a small framed photograph pushed to one side. A younger Vivian, her hair longer, standing beside a man with an easy smile and a slight heaviness around the eyes that was the look of someone who thought more than he said. They were standing somewhere coastal. She was laughing at something. He was watching her laugh. Landon looked away from the photograph. "Here," Vivian said. Her voice had changed. He crossed the room and stood beside the desk. She moved the journal so he could see. The entry was dated 13 months before Milo's surgery, and it was not about Milo. It was about a different child, a 4-year-old in Ohio, whose story Marcus had read about in a local news article someone had forwarded to him. The child needed a bone marrow procedure. The family had started a crowdfunding campaign that had barely reached 10% of their goal. The entry was 2 paragraphs, and the second paragraph ended with "sent something through the usual account." Not enough, probably. Never feels like enough. Didn't leave my name. Easier that way. For them, and for me. Vivian turned several pages, found another. A 7-year-old in Millfield. Burns from a house fire. Family uninsured. The entry noted the hospital, the name of a contact Marcus had apparently cultivated there, and at the bottom, made sure it was handled. They won't know it was me. That's fine. She kept reading, kept turning pages. Each one revealed another child, another family, another quiet intervention that her husband had conducted without telling her, without telling anyone as far as she could see. With the meticulous record-keeping of a man who treated generosity the same way he treated everything else, seriously, systematically, and in private. "How long does it go back?" Landon asked. Vivian looked at the shelf. "These start," she did the count, 8 years. 8 years of journals. 8 years of children her husband had helped without a word. She put the journal down and pressed both hands flat on the desk and stared at the wall for a moment. "I didn't know," she said. "No," Landon agreed. "I thought I knew him." She paused. "I thought I knew how he spent his time. I knew about the business, obviously. I knew about his projects, his—" She stopped. "I didn't know about any of this." "Why do you think he didn't tell you?" She picked up the journal again, turned to the entry about Milo, which she had found midway through. He had not used Milo's name, just the boy, 8 years old, heart condition, father works at the docks, mother not in the picture. He had noted the amount he had donated, the hospital, the date the surgery was scheduled. And then, 2 months later, a follow-up entry. A hospital contact says the surgery went well. He's doing well. Good. Just that. 2 words and a period. He's doing well. Good. Vivian read the words and Landon watched her read them, and neither of them said anything for a while. "I think," Vivian finally said quietly, "that there were a lot of things Marcus carried by himself. Things he thought I couldn't understand or wouldn't." She picked her words carefully. "Our marriage in the last few years was not what it had been. We were busy, we were successful and busy, and we were not talking. Not really. Not the way you're supposed to." She closed the journal. I think he found something here that he wasn't finding at home, a way to feel like what he was doing mattered. It did matter, Landon said. I know. She looked at him. I know it did. I'm not angry at him. I don't know what I am exactly, but it's not angry. Landon thought about the photograph on the desk. The younger version of this woman laughing at something at the coast. Can I ask you something? He said. Go ahead. When he died, was there warning or a car accident? Vivian said. January. He was driving back from a site visit in the evening, and a truck ran a light, and she paused. No warning, nothing. He left for the site visit in the morning, and I was in a meeting when my assistant came in and told me. She looked at her hands. I didn't cry for 3 days. I didn't cry at the funeral. I was so far into shock that it took 3 days before it started feeling real. I'm sorry. So am I. She looked at the shelf of journals again. Do you know what he was working on in the month before he died? I don't. I didn't know about any of this until you showed me. The final journal, Vivian said. She got up and moved to the shelf and pulled out the last one, the most recent year. She opened it to the last entry that had been written in it, near the back, and she stood there reading it. Whatever she read, her face did something that was not quite crying. It was the thing that happens before crying, when the body understands something that the mind is still trying to catch up to. He was going to talk to me, she said. The day after this entry, he was going to come home and talk to me about something. She held the journal out to Landon. The last entry was dated the day before Marcus Sterling's fatal accident. Landon read it. He read it twice. Then he handed the journal back and sat down in the guest chair, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Milo was asleep on the gray couch when Landon came back downstairs an hour later. He'd curled himself up with his jacket folded under his head and his shoes still on, because Milo had never once taken his shoes off before sleeping, which Landon had long ago accepted as a battle he was not going to win. The housekeeper, Elena, had put a light blanket over him at some point. He was breathing steadily, deeply, with the absolute commitment to sleep that only children manage. Landon stood in the doorway and looked at his son for a long moment. Then Vivian came downstairs and stood beside him, and they both looked at the sleeping child, and the silence between them was a different kind of silence than the one that had existed between them in the cemetery 4 hours ago. He has your nose, Vivian said. His mother's chin, Landon said. So I'm told. Vivian nodded. The surgery scar, she said. He mentioned it without embarrassment. He's been through enough that he doesn't waste energy being embarrassed about it anymore. Landon watched his son sleep. He had to grow up a little fast. I try to make sure he doesn't grow up too fast, but you can't control all of it. No, Vivian said. You can't. She looked at Landon. He could feel it without turning to face her. I want to ask you something, she said. All right. What do you do for work? He turned then. I manage logistics coordination for a mid-size freight company. It's not... He stopped. It sounds boring. It's mostly making sure things get where they're supposed to go on time, solving problems when they don't. Is that what you've always done? Before Milo's surgery, I was doing dock work, heavier lifting. When he came home from the hospital, I needed something with more predictable hours, so I went back to school online and got a logistics certification. Took 2 years working nights. She studied him in a way that was not unfriendly, more like she was adjusting something. Why did you really come to the grave? She said. I told you. You told me part of it. But there are easier ways to say thank you. You could have donated to a charity in his name, left flowers once and been done with it. You've been coming every month for 2 years. That's not just gratitude, that's something else. Landon looked back at Milo. When the surgery was over, he said slowly, and Milo was in recovery, and I knew he was going to be okay. I had this feeling I couldn't shake. Not just relief, something bigger than relief. Someone had done something for my son that was completely beyond what any stranger was obligated to do. Someone had looked at a kid they'd never met and decided that kid deserved to live. He paused. I couldn't I couldn't let that disappear. I couldn't let that be a thing that happened once and got filed away. I needed Milo to grow up knowing that someone chose to do that for him, even if he never knew who, even if it was just coming to a grave and standing there. He stopped. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense, Vivian said. I also think, Landon added more quietly, that I wanted someone to know what it meant, what that donation actually meant, not to a statistic, not to a hospital invoice, to a specific kid who now argues with me about burritos and has 100 on his math test and is asleep on your couch with his shoes on. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you came, she said. He looked at her. It sounded like it cost her something to say it. So am I, he said. She looked at her hands, then back at her sleeping housekeeper's charge on the couch, then at some point in the middle distance. He wrote about you, she said, about Milo. Not by name, but in enough detail that I knew exactly who he meant the moment I read it. He checked on Milo's progress 3 times through his hospital contact. He knew when Milo was discharged. He knew when the 6-month follow-up came back clean. She paused. He was so careful to remain anonymous. But he wasn't indifferent. He was following from a distance. Landon looked at the headstone in his mind. Husband, builder, dreamer. And thought about the man who had written in cramped handwriting late at night about a child he had never met, checking in like a silent guardian from a distance, never announcing himself, never expecting anything back. What was he like? Landon asked. Vivian considered the question for a long time. Complicated, she said. He was kind in ways he never showed in public. He was ambitious in ways that didn't always leave room for other things. He was better at solving other people's problems than the ones that were right in front of him. She paused. But he was trying. I can see that now. I can see it in the journals. He was always trying, even when neither of us knew how to talk about the fact that we were struggling. Milo shifted on the couch, pulled the blanket tighter without waking. He wrote about a foundation, Landon said. Yes. He'd been planning it for a while. It wasn't a new idea. No, Vivian said. Looking back at the journals, I can see where the idea started. Maybe 3 years in. He kept circling back to it. He knew he couldn't keep doing it alone, one family at a time. He wanted something, structured, something that could work after he was gone, even if he'd expected to be there to build it. He didn't get to do it. No. She said it plainly. No performance in it. Landon looked at her. Can I ask what you're going to do with what you found today? Vivian looked at the journals on the desk upstairs, as if she could see them through the ceiling. I don't know yet, she said. I need to sit with it. I need to read more. I need to understand how much of this I missed and whether, she stopped, whether there were things I could have done differently before. She looked at Landon. And I need to decide what I do with the things he left unfinished. The room was quiet. From the couch, Milo made a small sound in his sleep. Landon looked at his son's face, slack and easy in sleep, unbothered by the weight of what the 2 adults in the room were carrying, and he felt the thing he had felt 2 years ago in the hospital bathroom after the surgeon had come out and told him it went well. Not joy, exactly. Not relief, exactly. Something bigger and harder to name than either of those things. Gratitude so large it had nowhere to go. He had been carrying it to a grave every month, leaving it in carnations and quiet sentences because he didn't know where else to put it. Maybe, he thought, that was about to change. Milo woke up the way he always did. All at once. No gradual surfacing, just eyes open and immediately scanning the room like a small animal checking for threats. He sat up on the gray couch, the borrowed blanket pooled around his waist, and looked at the ceiling, then at the walls, then at his father sitting in the chair across from him. Where are we? He asked. Still at Ms. Sterling's house. Milo looked around at the room again, recalibrating. I fell asleep. You did. Did I snore? A little. You're lying. Probably, Landon admitted. Milo pushed the blanket off and sat up properly, rubbing one eye with the back of his hand. His hair was flattened on one side. He looked at the doorway, where Vivian had been standing 20 minutes ago before she'd excused herself to make a phone call, And then he looked at his father with the particular expression he used when he was about to ask something he'd been holding on to. "That lady," he said. "She's the wife of the man whose grave we visit." "Yes." "She didn't know about us." "No, she didn't." Milo processed this. "That's weird." "It is," Landon agreed. "Is she okay?" Landon looked toward the doorway. From somewhere in the back of the house came the low murmur of Vivian's voice on a phone call, too distant to make out words, but clear enough to hear that she was in business mode. Clipped sentences, authoritative pauses, the voice of a woman who ran things. "I don't think she's used to things catching her off guard," Landon said. "So no, probably not completely okay, but she's handling it." Milo thought about this with the seriousness he gave most things. "Is she nice?" "I think she's complicated." That's what adults say when they don't know if someone is nice or not. "Yeah," Landon said. "It is." Milo looked at the dried succulent on the windowsill. Someone had left it sitting there and forgotten it, and the white mineral ring around the bottom of the pot meant it had been watered irregularly for a long time before it gave up. He stared at it for a moment. "Dad," he said. "Yeah. The man whose grave we visit. He paid for my surgery because he wanted to. Nobody made him." "That's right." "And he never told anybody." "Not that we know of." Milo nodded slowly, like he was confirming something internal. "That's the right way to do it," he said. "If you help someone just so people will know you did it, that's not really helping. That's just showing off." Landon looked at his son. "Where did you hear that?" "Nowhere. I thought of it." "You thought of it?" "Yeah." Landon was quiet for a moment. "You're right," he said. "That's exactly right." Milo seemed satisfied with this and reached for his sneaker, which had come partially unlaced while he slept. He began retying it with the methodical focus he gave any task that required two hands. Landon watched him and felt the familiar tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with fear anymore, and everything to do with the specific weight of loving a person you could not protect from everything. He heard Vivian's footsteps on the stairs. She came into the room still carrying her phone, dressed the same, but something about her posture had shifted. Not looser, that was not the right word for this woman, but less armored maybe. Like she'd spent the last 30 minutes putting something down that she'd been holding up for a while, and her shoulders had not yet fully adjusted to the change. She looked at Milo. "You're awake." "I'm retying my shoe," he confirmed without looking up. "So you are." She sat in the chair near the window, not the couch, not beside either of them, just angled into the room. "I had to call my assistant. I was supposed to be somewhere this afternoon." She said it without apology, but also without the corporate weight she'd carried in her voice earlier. Just a statement. "I canceled it." "You didn't have to do that," Landon said. "I know I didn't have to." She looked at the dried plant on the windowsill, then at her hands. "I called the hospital, Millfield General. I asked to speak with someone in the billing department about a large anonymous donation made approximately 2.5 years ago." Landon said nothing. "They couldn't confirm donor identity," Vivian said. "Privacy protocols, but they confirmed the donation existed. They confirmed the amount. They confirmed that the procedure it covered matches the type of surgery consistent with." She glanced at Milo, who had finished his shoe and was now listening openly, because Milo had never pretended not to listen to things. "With the condition you described." "Okay," Landon said. "I also—" She paused. "I looked at Marcus's financial records. I have full access to the estate accounts. I found a transfer from a personal account he maintained separately from our joint finances. An account I knew existed but never looked at because it was his, and I respected that." She said the last part carefully, like it had a slight edge she was trying not to follow. "The amount and date match exactly." The room was quiet. "So it's confirmed," Landon said. "It's confirmed." Milo looked between them. "What's confirmed?" "That the man we visit at the cemetery," Landon said, "is definitely the person who paid for your surgery." Milo absorbed this. "I already thought it was him." "I know, but now we're sure." "Okay." He seemed to feel that this closed the logical loop cleanly. "Can I ask her something?" Landon looked at Vivian. Vivian looked at Milo. "Go ahead," she said. "What was he like?" Milo asked. Not businessman stuff. Just like, what was he like when he was at home? Vivian was quiet for long enough that Landon thought she might redirect the question, but she didn't. He was a terrible cook, she said. He knew about 4 recipes and he overestimated his ability with all of them. He kept buying ingredients for things he was going to make and then not making them, so the refrigerator was always full of things that eventually had to be thrown away. She paused. He laughed at his own jokes before he finished telling them, which should have been annoying, and it was sometimes, but mostly it just made you want to hear the rest of the joke. Milo smiled. That's a good thing. It was, Vivian said. She looked at the boy, and there was something in her face that was doing a complicated internal negotiation. He got very focused. When he was working on something, the whole rest of the world just kind of disappeared for him. Dinner, conversations, plans. He wasn't ignoring you intentionally. He just went deep inside whatever he was working on, and it was hard to pull him out. Dad does that too, Milo said. I don't do that, Landon said. You absolutely do that. I have to say your name like 3 times sometimes. Vivian's mouth curved slightly. Then you understand. Yeah, Milo said. It's annoying, but you get used to it. Landon decided not to pursue this line of conversation any further. Vivian looked at the journals on the table. She had brought 2 of them downstairs when she came back. The one from Milo's surgery year and the final one. They sat on the table between the couches with the stillness of objects that contained more than their physical weight. I need to go through all of them, she said. All 8 years. I started up in the study. I started in the middle, in the year of your son's surgery, because that was the most relevant. But I think to understand the full picture, I need to go from the beginning. When are you going to do that? Landon asked. I don't know. Tonight. This week. She picked up the older journal, the first year, and turned it over in her hands without opening it. I've been avoiding that study for a long time. Since he died, I've been in it maybe 3 times. I went in once to look for a document I needed for the estate lawyers, and I spent about 4 minutes in there, and then I found the document and I left as fast as I could. She set the journal back down. It still smells like him, the room, his aftershave or whatever it was. I haven't been able to spend more than a few minutes in there without it being... She stopped. I understand, Landon said. Do you? My wife left when Milo was 3. She didn't die. She just left. But there's still a cabinet in our apartment that has some things she left behind that I haven't moved in 5 years. So, he paused. Yeah, I understand the thing about not going into rooms. Vivian looked at him. It was a different look than she'd given him in the cemetery or in the study upstairs. Less calculating, less guarded. What happened with her? She asked. She wasn't built for it, Landon said simply. The hardship. She married someone she thought had a certain kind of future. And when that future didn't materialize and things got hard, she needed something I couldn't give her at that point. And she left. He said it without bitterness, which was something that had taken him a long time to achieve. Milo asks about her sometimes. I tell him the truth at whatever level he's ready for. What level is he at now? That sometimes people make choices that are hard to understand, but that don't mean you're not worth staying for. That her leaving was about her limits, not his worth. Milo was looking at his shoes. I know you're talking about me, he said. I know you know, Landon said. Milo looked up. It's okay. I've heard the speech. I believe it. He looked at Vivian. Do you have any kids? The question landed the way Milo's questions tended to land. Direct, unweighted, carrying no awareness of the ways it might be hard to answer. Vivian held very still for a moment. No, she said. Did you want them? Milo, Landon said. It's okay, Vivian said quickly. She looked at the boy. Yes, we did. It just didn't happen. That's sad, Milo said. Yes, Vivian said. It is. She said it without qualification, and there was a quietness to it that was not the composed professional quietness she'd been using all afternoon. It was just the truth, sitting there plainly. Milo looked at her for a moment. Then he did something Landon did not expect. He slid off the couch, walked over to the chair where Vivian was sitting, and sat on the armrest beside her. not touching her, just close. The way he sometimes parked himself next to people when he decided, by some internal calculus Landon had never fully decoded, that they needed company. Vivian looked at him. "You can pet the armrest if it bothers you," Milo said, very seriously. "I'm not going to fall." Landon pressed his hand briefly over his mouth. Vivian blinked. "What?" "People get nervous when I sit on armrests. I'm telling you preemptively that I'm not going to fall so you don't have to worry about it." Thank you for clarifying." "You're welcome." Vivian looked at Landon over the boy's head. Landon could not help it. He smiled. It was a helpless, exhausted, genuine smile of a man whose child had just disarmed a billionaire CEO by sitting on a chair arm and explaining gravity. She almost smiled back. It didn't quite make it all the way, but it was close. They stayed another hour. Not because anyone planned for it, but because the afternoon moved the way afternoons do when you're inside something significant and no one wants to be the first to stand up and break the spell of it. Vivian made coffee in a kitchen that was large and well-equipped and looked like it was used mostly by people who weren't her. Milo found a chess set in a cabinet and asked if anyone wanted to play. And when Vivian said she knew how, his eyebrows went up in a way that conveyed clear skepticism, and they ended up at the kitchen table with Landon watching from the other side while Milo tried to hustle a 30-year-old CEO at chess and did not entirely fail. "You moved your bishop wrong," Milo said. "I moved it legally." "Legally, but bad. You've left your queen exposed on the right side for like 4 moves. I'm aware of where my queen is." "Are you, though? Would you like to find out?" Milo studied the board, then he moved his knight. Then he looked up at her. Then he looked back at the board with the particular expression of someone realizing they have miscalculated. "Oh," he said. Vivian said. "Did you do that on purpose?" "I've been doing it on purpose for 3 moves. Milo turned to his father. "She's actually good. I see that. You could have warned me. I didn't know." Milo turned back to the board with fresh focus, and Vivian sat across from him with her coffee and what was now clearly a real, small, actual smile. Not performed, not polite, the kind that comes without permission. She glanced at Landon once, briefly, and he looked away and found something on the countertop to examine, because looking at the scene directly felt like something he didn't have a name for yet and was not ready to name. When they finally stood to leave, the light through the kitchen windows had gone the color of late afternoon, turning the pale hardwood floors warm and amber. Milo shook Vivian's hand at the door, formally, which was something he'd started doing recently and which Landon suspected was either the result of a video about professional etiquette or a game at school. Vivian shook it back, equally formal, and said it had been a pleasure, and Milo said likewise, and Landon had to look at the ceiling briefly. He shook her hand as well. It was the first time they'd actually touched. Her grip was firm and brief, her hand cold from the coffee mug she'd set down a minute ago. "Thank you for coming in," she said. "I know this wasn't easy for either of us. Thank you for not having us thrown out at the cemetery. I thought about it. I could tell." She held his gaze for a moment. "I'll reach out. I need time to go through everything, but I'll reach out." "You don't have to," Landon said. "I know." She said it the same way she'd said everything else when she meant it. Flat and certain, no performance. "But I will." They walked to the truck. Milo climbed in and put on his seatbelt and immediately tilted his face toward the passenger window, watching the Sterling house as Landon backed out of the driveway. "She's lonely," Milo said. Landon pulled out onto the road. "What makes you say that?" "The house is too clean. People who have a lot going on in their life don't have houses that clean. Things get left places." He considered. "Also, nobody drew on the chess pieces or anything. Nobody's touched that set in a while." Landon looked at the road ahead. "When did you start noticing things like that?" Milo shrugged. "I don't know. It's just obvious." "It's not obvious to most people." "Then most people aren't paying attention." Landon drove. The city unfolded around them as they moved back east, the houses getting smaller and the signs getting louder, and the space between buildings shrinking back down to what Landon knew as the ordinary texture of his life. Their building came into view. Brick, 6 stories, The laundry room exhaust vent on the second floor that always smelled like dryer sheets when you walked past it on the sidewalk. Dad? Yeah? That man, Milo said. Marcus. He spent years helping kids and he never told anyone, not even her. He paused. Do you think she's going to do something about it? Like, not just feel sad about it, actually do something. Landon parked, turned off the engine. I don't know yet, he said. I hope she does. Milo unclipped his seatbelt. It would be a waste to find all that out and just be sad about it. He opened the truck door and dropped to the curb and started toward the building entrance, leaving Landon sitting in the quiet truck. It would be a waste. Landon sat with that for a moment. The straightforward certainty of it. The way his son said hard things like they were simple, not because he didn't understand the complexity, but because he had decided the complexity was beside the point. He got out of the truck. Vivian read for most of the night. She had not planned to. She had planned to go through the 2 journals she'd brought downstairs, make notes, sleep by midnight. That plan dissolved somewhere around 9 o'clock when she found herself back in the study with all 8 journals spread across the desk, working through them in order, a legal pad at her elbow filling with dates and names, and the small, quiet details of a life she had shared a house with for 11 years and somehow not fully known. The journals were not confessional. Marcus was not a man who wrote emotionally. He wrote observationally, practically, with the spare clarity of someone who used language as a tool rather than an outlet. But the entries were consistent, every donation logged, every family noted in enough detail to be real, to have weight. A father who worked 2 jobs, a mother who sat in a hospital waiting room for 9 hours, a child who came out of surgery and went home and presumably grew up and went to school and ate burritos and got hundreds on math tests. She found a name she recognized in the 3rd journal, a family she'd seen at a charity gala 2 years before that, people who had been held up as a success story for a different foundation entirely, a foundation she and Marcus had attended a fundraiser for. And here, in Marcus's cramped handwriting, a note that he had made an anonymous contribution to their son's treatment 6 months before the gala. He had been in the audience at that gala, listening to a family thank an organization for help that had come partly, quietly, from him. And she had been sitting right beside him. He had never said a word. She pressed her hand flat on the page. He hadn't told her because, and this was the part she was still working through, still building up to, because it was the part that cost something. Because by the time he started doing this in earnest, they had already stopped being the kind of couple who told each other things that mattered. The journals noted the donations with the same regularity he had logged business decisions, because that was how his mind worked. But scattered between the entries were fragments that were not about finances or families at all. Small personal notes, dated late at night, that she almost missed because they were so brief. V was in Berlin this week. The house feels wrong when it's empty. Tried to bring up the counseling thing again. She shut it down. I don't know how to keep trying without feeling like I'm pushing someone who doesn't want to be pushed. Maybe she's right. Maybe we're past the point where talking would do anything. We had dinner together tonight. First time in 2 weeks, we both sat down at the same table. It was fine. It was civil. I hate that fine and civil is what we're at. I remember when we weren't. Vivian read these and sat with them. She had known the marriage was struggling. She had known, not in a conversation they'd had because those conversations had become too hard, too loaded, both of them too exhausted and too proud and too afraid of what the honest answers might be. But in the ambient, wordless way you know things you've been refusing to look at directly. She had buried herself in work. He had apparently buried himself in the quiet project of trying to fix other people's irreparable situations when he couldn't fix his own. She didn't know whether to be angry at him for it or not. She decided she wasn't angry. She was sad, which was different and somehow harder. The final journal entry was the one she kept coming back to. She had read it 5 times in the study that afternoon with Landon standing beside her, and she read it again now alone, and it still hit the same way each time. His handwriting was slightly messier than usual in this entry. It was late. He'd noted the time at the top, one of the few times he ever did. 11:47 at night, the night before the accident. I've been thinking about the Hargrove kid for a month now. Not specifically him, but what he represents. There are too many of them. One at a time isn't enough. It's never going to be enough doing it this way. I want to build something, a real structure, not a charity that spends half its intake on overhead and the other half on branding, something that actually reaches the families who are falling through every gap there is. I think I know who could run it with me. Maybe. Probably not with me, but could take the idea and do something real with it. The woman from the development office at Millfield General, she's been my contact there for 2 years, and she understands what these families actually need. And Vivian, if I can explain it right, if I can actually sit down and talk to her about it, the way I used to be able to talk to her. Maybe. I'm going to ask her tomorrow. Actually ask her. I've been circling around it for months because I was afraid she'd think it was foolish or small, but I don't think she'd think that. I think I've just been afraid of sitting across from her and being real about something for the first time in a long time. She's asleep right now. I can hear her from the hallway. I'm going to finish this and then sleep, and tomorrow I'm going to drive home from the site visit and sit down and actually talk to her. If she says no, she says no. But I think she might say yes. He never came home from the site visit. Vivian closed the journal. She sat in the study for a long time after that, in the dark, because she had not turned the lamp back on after it went off on the timer. The room smelled like him. She had been running from that smell for 18 months, and tonight she had sat in it for 4 hours, and it still hurt, but it was no longer unbearable. Tomorrow, she thought, she would call Landon Hayes. She did not know exactly what she was going to say. She knew that she had spent 1.5 years building a very efficient, very productive, very hollow version of her life, and that this afternoon a stranger at a grave had handed her a piece of paper with her dead husband's handwriting on it and cracked something open that she was not going to be able to close again. She knew that Marcus had looked at a child he'd never met and decided that child deserved to live. And then he'd spent 2 years quietly checking on that child's progress. And then he'd died before he could build the thing that would make sure the next child and the next child and the one after that didn't fall through the same gap. He was going to ask her tomorrow. She pulled out her phone, opened a new note, wrote one line. What would it cost to set up a foundation properly? Call the estate lawyer Monday. Then she turned the phone over on the desk. Outside the window, the city was doing what it always did at 2 a.m, half asleep, half restless, streetlights on, a car somewhere below moving slowly through the neighborhood. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of night that didn't know or care what had shifted in this room. Vivian looked at the shelf of journals. 8 years of her husband trying to matter in the ways he didn't know how to talk about. She picked up her phone again. She did not call Landon yet. It was 2 a.m, and she was not the kind of person who called people at 2 a.m, even when something urgent had rearranged the furniture of her understanding. But she wrote a second note below the first. Ask Landon Hayes what he knows about what families actually need when they hit the system. He knows from the inside. That matters. She put the phone down. For the first time in a very long time, she did not feel like the house was too quiet around her. She felt like she was inside something that was just beginning, and it was not comfortable, and it was not easy, and she did not know yet where it went. But it was something. That was more than she'd had yesterday. She called on Monday morning at 8:47. Landon was in the truck, 10 minutes from the freight office. Coffee in the cup holder going cold the way it always did because he always forgot about it until it was too late. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat and he glanced at the screen and saw a number he didn't recognize, which he almost let go to voicemail, except that something made him pick up. This is Landon. It's Vivian Sterling. A beat. I hope this isn't a bad time. I'm driving. Give me a second. He pulled into a gas station lot and put the truck in park. Okay, I'm here. I went through all of them, she said. All 8 journals. I finished around 4 this morning. He looked at the gas station window, which had a hand-lettered sign advertising a breakfast special. All 8. Yes. How are you doing? A pause. Not a long one, but long enough to mean something. I've been better. I've also been worse. I'm somewhere in the middle. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she seemed to say most things. I want to move forward with the foundation. I've already called my estate lawyer. I have a meeting with him Wednesday to discuss the legal structure. But before I get into any of that, I need to talk to you. About what? About what you actually know. from your side of it. She paused again. You were the person in the waiting room. You were the person filling out the applications that went nowhere. You were inside the system in a way I've never been, and I need to understand that before I start making decisions about how to build something meant to fix it. Landon looked at the dashboard, the crack that ran across the lower right corner. He'd been meaning to deal with it for 2 years. All right, he said. When? Are you free this evening? I have to get Milo from school at 3:30. Bring him. Elena makes something she calls pasta that Milo would probably have opinions about. There was a dryness to the way she said it that wasn't quite a joke, but was in the neighborhood of one. Landon found himself almost smiling at the steering wheel. I'll ask him. He has opinions about most things. I've noticed. Look, Milo did have opinions about Elena's pasta. Specifically, he thought the sauce needed more red pepper flakes, a note he delivered to Elena directly, in the kitchen, in a tone of genuine culinary consultation rather than complaint. Elena, who was in her 50s and had worked for the Sterling household for 11 years and had survived Marcus's enthusiastic food commentary and Vivian's total indifference to cooking, looked at this 8-year-old who had wandered into her kitchen like he owned the place and laughed for the first time in what felt like months. She added the red pepper flakes. Milo ate 2 full bowls. While this was happening at the kitchen table, Landon and Vivian sat in the study. She had organized things. The journals were stacked in order on one side of the desk. The legal pad she'd been writing on was open to a page covered in notes, and the desk itself had been partially cleared. Not fully, still Marcus's organized chaos underneath it all, but enough space created on the surface that there was room for 2 people to work. On the corner of the desk, the framed photograph of the 2 of them at the coast was still there. Vivian had moved it slightly, so it faced more toward the window than toward the center of the room, which was either deliberate or wasn't, but either way meant something. I want to understand the gap, Vivian said, uncapping a pen. Not abstractly, specifically. When your son was diagnosed, walk me through what happened with the financial side. Landon had not talked about this in detail with anyone in 2 years. Not because it was too painful. It was, still, a little, but he'd processed most of it. But because the people in his life were not people who needed the details, and because he was not generally someone who offered more than was asked for. He folded his hands on the desk. The diagnosis came in April, he said. Milo was 6, almost 7. We'd been to the pediatrician because he was getting tired faster than other kids when he played outside. The pediatrician referred us to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist did the echocardiogram, and that's when we found out. Vivian was writing. The cardiologist gave us a timeline. She was careful not to alarm me more than necessary, but she was also direct. 8 to 10 months before the risk curve shifted significantly. The surgery he needed was a septal myectomy. It's a specialized cardiac procedure. There are maybe 12 hospitals in the country that do it with consistently strong outcomes. Millfield General was one of them, which was lucky for us in terms of location, unlucky in terms of the cost. What was the total? With everything, the procedure, the pre-surgical workup, 2 days in the ICU, recovery, and the follow-up protocol, we were looking at a little under $140,000. Vivian wrote the number down. My insurance at the time was through the freight company, Landon continued. It covered a portion of cardiac procedures but had a cap on specialized surgical interventions. The coverage would have paid roughly $42,000. That left me responsible for close to $100,000 with a 6-year-old and a logistics coordinator salary. What did you try? Everything I could find. He said it without drama. The hospital had a financial assistance program. I qualified for partial aid. They would reduce the bill by 20% for households under a certain income threshold. That brought the gap down to about $78,000. Still, not a number I could close. What about the other programs, grants, foundations? I spent about 6 weeks applying. I kept a spreadsheet. He said it with the slight grimness of someone who still remembered that spreadsheet. There are a lot of organizations that exist to help families in these situations. What I learned very fast is that most of them are underfunded relative to the need. Most have waiting lists of 3 to 12 months, and most have eligibility criteria that are either very narrow or require documentation that takes time to compile. Time I didn't have. Vivian stopped writing. What do you mean by narrow criteria? Some are diagnosis specific. There was one foundation that covered cardiac procedures, but only for children under 5. Milo was 6. One covered septal myectomies, but only for families in 3 specific states. We weren't in any of them. One had an application process that required a letter of medical necessity, 2 years of tax returns, a written statement from the primary care physician, a written statement from the specialist, and proof of insurance denial. And their next review cycle was in 8 months. He paused. 8 months was the outside of the window my son had. Vivian looked at what she'd written. Then she looked at Landon. So the system isn't non-existent, she said. It's misaligned. That's one way to say it. He thought about it. There's money. There are people who want to help. But the structure is designed around what's comfortable for the organizations, not around what families actually need. The application processes are complicated because it protects against fraud, which I understand. The eligibility windows are narrow because it's easier to have a focus area, which I understand. But when you're the parent sitting across from a cardiologist being told your kid has a shrinking window, none of that is what matters. What matters is, can I get someone to say yes in the next 60 days? And nobody said yes in 60 days. Nobody said yes at all. The donation came out of nowhere while I was still working through the list. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Marcus found you through the hospital contact, she said. Someone inside who flagged cases that were falling through. That's what I assume, based on how he described other donations in the journals. He had a contact in the billing department who knew what to look for. A woman named Sonia Rayburn, Vivian said. She's in the journals by first name starting in year 2. I looked her up. She's still at Millfield General, still in the same department. Landon looked at her. You've done a lot of research in the last 48 hours, he said. I didn't sleep much. No, she said it plainly, without complaint. I also pulled data, publicly available, hospital financial reports, charity overhead ratios, pediatric specialty procedure costs in this region. If I'm going to build something, I want to understand the actual landscape. What did you find? That in this county alone, in any given year, there are somewhere between 60 and 80 pediatric cases that fit the profile of your son's situation. Diagnosis requiring specialized intervention, family income too high to qualify for Medicaid, insurance coverage with a gap that makes the net cost unmanageable, and a time constraint that makes the standard assistance pipeline useless. She turned the legal pad so he could see the numbers she'd written and circled. 60 to 80 children per year, just in this county, just in pediatric, cardiac, and oncology cases. Landon looked at the number. That's a lot of kids, he said. It's a lot of kids, Vivian agreed. And that's conservative. It doesn't count cases in surrounding counties, doesn't count other specialties, doesn't count families who never made it through the application process far enough to show up in any data. She stood up and went to the window. Outside, the late afternoon light was doing something warm to the hedges along the driveway. She stood with her back to Landon, one arm crossed over her body, the other hand at her chin. Marcus was solving one at a time, she said. He solved maybe 30, 35 cases over 8 years. He was one person working privately, and he could only do so much. She turned. If I build this correctly, with proper funding structure and a faster-moving intake process, we could be solving 60 a year within the first 2 years of operation, maybe more. What does building it correctly look like? She came back to the desk. It looks like this, she said, and turned to a clean page of the legal pad. Fast intake. Maximum 14 days from first contact to funding decision. That means a streamlined application. Medical necessity letter from the specialist, basic financial documentation, insurance statement. 3 documents, not 10. The vetting happens quickly because the criteria are clear. What are the criteria? Pediatric cases only. Specialized procedure with documented urgency. So there's a time component, which is what separates these cases from the ones the existing pipeline can handle. Family income and coverage gap that puts the net cost beyond reasonable reach. That's the core of it. She paused. No geographic restriction within the state. No diagnosis-specific limitation. If the kid needs it and can't get it in time, that's the criterion. Landon looked at what she was writing. There's a piece you're missing, he said. She looked up. The families who don't know to apply, he said. When you're in it, when you're working two jobs and you've got a sick kid and you're filling out paperwork at midnight because that's the only time you have, you don't always know what exists. I found most of those foundations through a social worker at the hospital who handed me a printout that was 2 years out of date. A lot of families never even get the printout. Vivian was still. So the intake has to come from the other direction, she said. Partially, yeah. If you have the hospital contact that Marcus had, someone inside who knows what to look for, you're catching families who might not find you on their own. Sonia Rayburn, Vivian said. She'd know others too, other hospitals, other departments. If you build the intake from the inside out instead of waiting for families to come to you, you close that gap. Vivian wrote this down. She wrote for a moment, then stopped. Would you be willing to work on this with me? She said. The directness of it was very her. No build-up, no softening, just the question, set down like a document on a desk. Landon looked at her. In what capacity? He asked. You understand the family side of this in a way I don't and never will. I can build the financial architecture. I can navigate the legal structure, the funding, the board. I can talk to donors. What I can't do is sit across from a family in crisis and know what they actually need versus what looks good on a program description. She held his gaze. I need someone who knows the difference between a policy that reads well and one that actually works for the people it's supposed to help. You know that difference. Landon thought about his spreadsheet. $78,000 and a deadline and a 6-year-old who did not know yet what his father was carrying. I have a full-time job, he said. I'm not asking you to quit it, not yet. I'm asking you to advise. Consult on the intake criteria, the application process, the family communication. Time commitment is whatever you can give, she paused. Compensated, obviously. I'm not doing it for compensation. I know, I'm paying you anyway because I'm not building something on someone's goodwill. That's how foundations fall apart. He almost argued. He saw quickly that she was right. All right, he said. She nodded once, like a decision made in a meeting, moving on. But underneath the efficiency of it, Landon could see, because he'd been watching her for 3 days now and had started to learn the tells she didn't know she was showing, that it mattered to her, that she'd been up until 4 a.m, not just because she was processing grief, but because she had found something to do with it, finally, and she was not going to waste the momentum. There's one more thing, she said. Okay. I want to name it after him. She said it without looking up from the legal pad. I'm not trying to turn it into a monument, but he spent 8 years doing this quietly, and nobody knew. And I think... She stopped. I think he deserved to be known for it. Not the business, not the acquisition record. This. Landon was quiet. The Marcus Sterling Foundation, he said. Something like that. Maybe simpler. I'll think about it. She clicked the pen closed. The lawyer can help with the naming parameters Wednesday. She was putting it back into logistics, back into the practical. He recognized the move. He used it himself, the retreat into the concrete when something felt like too much to hold. He'd have hated it, Landon said. Vivian looked up sharply. Naming it after him, Landon said. Based on what you've described. Based on the journals. He specifically didn't want his name on anything. Vivian held his gaze. Then, slowly, something in her face did something complicated. Not quite a smile. Not quite the opposite of one. Something in between. You're probably right, she said. So name it something else. Name it after the idea. What idea? The next child gets a chance. Landon shrugged. Something like that. Something that says what it does without putting anyone's name on it. Vivian looked at the legal pad. She wrote, Next Chance Foundation? She looked at it. It's not bad, she said. It's not final, Landon said, but it's not bad. The Wednesday meeting with the estate lawyer lasted 3 hours. Vivian went alone, which was her default for professional meetings, but she came out of it with a clear legal roadmap and a list of approximately 47 follow-up tasks, which she sent to herself in a voice memo on the drive home and transcribed into a project document that night. The following Monday, she met with Sonia Rayburn. She had arranged it through the hospital's development office, framing it as a donor consultation, which was accurate in the technical sense. But when Sonia Rayburn arrived at the Sterling house, a small, compact woman in her early 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and the particular directness of someone who had spent decades watching people find or fail to find help in the worst moments of their lives, Vivian did not start with the donor pitch. She started with the journals. She showed Sonia the entries, showed her the entries that named her, or something close enough to her name that there was no question. Watch the woman's face move through recognition, and then something beyond recognition, something that was clearly a grief she had been carrying privately for over a year. "He told you about me," Sonia said. It was not quite a question. "He didn't tell me anything," Vivian said. "He told his journals. I just found them." Sonia was quiet for a moment. "He called me every few months for 6 years. We had a system. I would flag cases that fit certain parameters, urgent timeline, coverage gap, no viable path through standard channels. I'd pass along anonymized information. He'd make the call about whether to fund." She paused. "He never wanted to know the families personally. He just wanted to know they were okay after." "Did you know he'd died?" "I found out a week after." Sonia took her reading glasses off her head and turned them in her hands. "I didn't contact you. I didn't know how. I didn't know whether you knew about what he was doing or whether it would—" She stopped. "I didn't know what to do with it, so I didn't do anything." "You weren't wrong to be cautious," Vivian said. "Maybe, but I kept flagging cases for 4 months after he died, out of habit. There was nobody on the other end anymore." She said it simply, but the weight of it was clear. "I eventually stopped." "I know." Vivian placed the legal pad on the coffee table between them. "I want to start it back up, properly this time, with a structure that doesn't depend on one person." Sonia looked at the legal pad, read what was on it, read it again. "This is real," she said. "Yes. You've already talked to a lawyer. Last Wednesday. We have a proposed structure and a timeline for the nonprofit filing." Vivian leaned forward slightly. "What I need from you is the intake side. What you know about how to identify the right cases fast. Who else in the hospital system I should be talking to. What the process would need to look like so that families are found before they run out of time." Sonia was quiet for a long moment. "You should know," she said, "that there's a case right now. I've been sitting on it for 3 weeks because there was nothing I could do with it." Vivian went still. "Tell me," she said. 7-year-old girl, Wilm's tumor, kidney cancer, requires a specialized surgical approach at one of 4 centers in the country, 2 of which are overseas. The nearest one that does this specific procedure is in Boston. The surgery and follow-up protocol runs to about $160,000. Her parents are both working. Their combined income is just above the Medicaid threshold. Their insurance is covering about 50%. They have 8 weeks before the surgical window closes. 8 weeks. The oncologist says ideally 6. The room was quiet. Vivian looked at the legal pad. The foundation did not legally exist yet. The filing would take several weeks minimum. She did not have a board, did not have a formal intake process, did not have any of the infrastructure she had been meticulously designing on her legal pad in her late-night hours at the desk. What she had was money. Her own money, in her own accounts, right now. "Send me the anonymized case file," she said. "Today, if you can." Sonia studied her. "You're going to fund it out of pocket before the foundation exists." "I'm going to make sure a 7-year-old gets her surgery within the next 2 weeks," Vivian said. "The paperwork catches up later." Sonia looked at her for a long moment. "You sound like him," she said. Vivian did not have an answer to that. She felt the sentence land somewhere in her chest and stay there. "Send me the file," she said. She called Landon that evening. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he was not driving. She could hear the television in the background, some program Milo was watching, a voice doing a dramatic nature documentary narration, and then the sound dropped off as Landon moved into another room. "The foundation can't formally fund anyone for at least 6 weeks," she said. "Legal timeline, but there's a case right now with a 6-week window." "You're going to fund it yourself," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, but I need to walk through the family communication piece with you before I do it. I don't know how to approach the family. I know how to write checks. I don't know how to tell a parent that their kid's surgery is covered without making it feel transactional or pity-driven or like they owe something. Silence on his end. She could hear him thinking. How did Marcus approach it? Landon asked. He used Sonia as an intermediary and kept himself anonymous, a padded envelope with a watch and a note card. That worked for him, Landon said. But you're building something with a name and a structure. At some point, the families are going to know where it's coming from. You can't start with the anonymous model if the foundation is eventually going to have a face. What would you do? He was quiet for a moment. I'd tell them the truth. Not all of it. Not the journals, not the personal history. Just, there's a fund that exists to help families like yours. We've reviewed your case. We want to help. There's nothing you need to do except let us. No performance, no charity gala language. Just, you're not alone. Here's what that looks like practically. That's it? The hardest thing when you're in it, Landon said, is feeling like you're drowning and everyone's handing you a form instead of a life jacket. If you skip the form first and just throw the life jacket, people can actually breathe again. While Vivian wrote this down on the legal pad that had been living on the kitchen counter for the past 4 days. I'm not good at that, she said. The person part. The actual talking to someone in crisis. I know, he said. A beat. Would you come with me? She asked. He did not answer immediately. She heard him exhale slowly. When? This week, if possible. Sonia's going to arrange it through the hospital social worker. I'll have to sort out Milo's after-school coverage. I can arrange someone, if that would help. It's fine. I'll figure it out. A pause. Vivian? Yes. You're doing the right thing. You know that. She looked at the kitchen window, the city outside, dark, indifferent, doing its ordinary thing. I'm doing something, she said. Whether it's the right thing depends on how it lands. Yeah, he said. That's how most things work. She almost said something else. She wasn't sure what. The moment passed, and they said goodnight, and she put the phone down on the counter and stood there in the kitchen for a minute. The house didn't feel too quiet tonight. She didn't know exactly when that had changed. She picked up the legal pad. Next Chance Foundation, she had written a week ago. Beneath it, tonight, she wrote a second line. Week 1. First case, 7-year-old girl, kidney surgery. Boston. She looked at it, crossed out week 1. Wrote, day 1. Then she went back to the desk. The social worker's name was Deb Fontaine, and she had been at Millfield General for 19 years, which meant she had sat across from approximately 19 years' worth of parents in impossible situations and had developed a particular skill for reading a room before she walked into it. She read this one in about 4 seconds. The Okafor family was in the small consultation room on the 4th floor, the one with the round table and the chairs that were slightly too soft, the one Deb used specifically for financial conversations because the softer chairs made people feel less like they were in a courtroom. Renee Okafor was 34, a dental hygienist, and had the look of someone who had not slept a full night in 3 weeks. Her husband, Daniel, was 36, a high school history teacher with a quiet, deliberate way of speaking that suggested he was the kind of man who chose his words carefully because he'd learned that the wrong ones cost something. Their daughter Amara was upstairs in the pediatric ward, recovering from a diagnostic procedure, and neither parent had gone more than 30 feet from the building in the past 4 days. Deb brought Vivian and Landon in and introduced them without elaborate explanation. A representative from a private fund, she said. Here to talk about options. She had told the Okafors only that much in advance, deliberately, because in her experience, the word foundation made people feel like charity cases before anyone had said a word. And Deb Fontaine was very particular about not doing that to people. Renee Okafor looked at Vivian and then at Landon, trying to read which one was the decision maker. What kind of fund? She asked. The kind that covers surgical costs for children in situations like yours, Vivian said. She had rehearsed this with Landon in the parking garage for 11 minutes before coming up, and she was using his language, not hers. No fund terminology, no mission statement phrasing. Just the sentence. Daniel Okafor's jaw tightened slightly. We're not looking for charity. I know, Vivian said. We've been managing. We have a payment plan with the hospital. I know about the payment plan, Vivian said. I also know the surgical center in Boston requires full payment confirmed before scheduling, and that your current timeline has about 6 weeks in it, and that 6 weeks isn't enough time for the payment plan to get you there. She said it plainly, without cushioning it. Landon had told her, don't soften the thing they already know. They know it. They've been living inside it. Softening it sounds like you think they can't handle it. Daniel looked at his wife. Renee was looking at the table. What does it mean for Amara if this fund covers the surgery? She asked. She did not look up when she said it. It means the Boston Center gets confirmed funding this week, Vivian said. It means they can schedule. It means the 6-week window is no longer the thing you're working against. Renee put both hands flat on the table. They were shaking slightly. There are no conditions? Daniel said. His teacher's voice, measured and careful. We don't owe anything back. There's no loan structure, no reporting requirements, no 3 documents, Landon said. He had not spoken until this moment, and both Okafors looked at him. Medical necessity letter from your daughter's oncologist, which the hospital already has on file. Basic household financial statement. Insurance coverage summary. That's it. No home visits. No quarterly check-ins. No requirement to attend anything or talk to anyone. Daniel looked at him. How did you know about this fund? Landon hesitated for exactly 1 second. My son needed surgery 2.5 years ago, he said. Heart procedure. We were in a situation not entirely different from yours. Someone covered it anonymously. He paused. This fund is an extension of that. The room was quiet. Renee looked up from the table for the first time. She looked at Landon, and then at Vivian, and then back at Landon, and the expression on her face was the expression of a person who has been holding something very heavy for a long time and is being asked to believe they can put it down. Is Amara going to be okay? She asked. It was not a question directed at the medicine. She knew the medicine. She had heard the odds from 3 separate oncologists. What she was asking was something that did not have a statistical answer, and everyone in the room understood that. We can't promise that, Landon said, but we can make sure the surgery isn't the part that stops her. Renee Okafor put her hands over her face. Her husband reached across and put his arm around her, and she leaned into him, and the two of them sat there for a moment in the particular way of people who have been strong in front of each other for so long that a small loosening of the tension becomes overwhelming. Vivian looked at her hands on the table. Landon watched the couple and said nothing. There was nothing to say. This was the part that was not about the foundation or the legal structure or the carefully worded intake criteria. This was just a room with 2 people in it who had been scared for 3 weeks, and the fear was still there, but one piece of it had just been lifted. Deb Fontaine, who had been standing near the door with the particular invisibleness of someone who had learned how to be present without intruding, caught Landon's eye and gave him a small nod. He nodded back. The confirmation to Boston Children's took 4 days to process. On the 5th day, Amara Okafor's surgery was scheduled. Vivian did not find out through Sonia or Deb or anyone formal. She found out because Renee Okafor sent a text message to the number Landon had given her at 6:23 in the morning, which said only, "She's scheduled, thank you." And Landon forwarded it to Vivian, and Vivian sat at her kitchen counter with her coffee and read it twice, and then put the phone face down on the counter for a moment and collected herself. Then she picked it back up and sent Landon a message. 1 down. He replied, "The foundation is still 6 weeks from being real. 3 weeks now. I called the lawyer." A pause. Then, "Of course you did." She almost smiled at the screen. The Next Chance Foundation filed its nonprofit paperwork 4 weeks later. In those 4 weeks, Vivian had assembled a 5-person board, which included her estate lawyer, a pediatric oncologist from Millfield General who had been referred by Sonia Rayburn, a child welfare advocate she had met through a professional contact, and 2 people she had interviewed specifically for their knowledge of how charitable organizations failed, because she was, as she told Landon, far more interested in failure modes than success stories when it came to building something meant to last. She had also hired a part-time operations coordinator, a woman named Priya, who had previously managed intake for a legal aid nonprofit and understood the difference between a process that worked on paper and one that worked under pressure. Landon had reviewed the intake criteria document 3 times, marking it up with notes from his spreadsheet and his memory of what the applications had actually asked versus what had mattered. He flagged 4 places where the language was bureaucratically clean but practically burdensome. Vivian revised them. He flagged 2 more. She revised them again. On the 3rd pass, he handed the document back and said he didn't have anything else. She looked at the document, then at him. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. You've been very thorough about telling me when something is wrong. I want to make sure you're not softening it because you think I've heard enough." "I'm not softening anything. The document is good." He paused. "The turnaround time commitment is aggressive. 2 weeks from intake to decision is tight." "It needs to be tight. I know, I'm just noting it for when it gets hard." "When is harder than if," she said. "I know." She capped her pen. "Anything else?" The section on family communication still sounds like it was written by someone who learned English from grant applications. She looked at the relevant section. "Read it." "What would you change?" "All of it. Give me the document." He took it and rewrote 2 paragraphs in his own language. Plain, direct, the way he would have wanted someone to speak to him in a hospital waiting room. She read them and was quiet for a moment. "This is better," she said. "I know. I'm not sure whether you're easy to work with or difficult," she said. "I'm consistent," he said, which is different from both. She looked at him in the particular way she had developed over the past several weeks, assessing but without the suspicion that had been in it the first day at the cemetery. More like she was still calibrating something and not quite finished. "You should let me pay you properly," she said. "We've had this conversation. I'm going to keep having it until you say yes. Then we'll be having it for a while." She made a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and something not entirely unlike a laugh, and went back to the document. The Foundation's first official case under the nonprofit structure was a 9-year-old boy in the eastern part of the county named Theo Barish. Bone tumor. Surgery at a specialty orthopedic center 3 states away. His parents had already sold 1 car. His mother had taken a second job that had lasted 11 days before she had a minor breakdown in the parking lot and quit because she could not function on 4 hours of sleep and full-time fear simultaneously. Landon met the Barish family first, without Vivian, because by this point they had developed a rhythm. He did the initial family contact, built the baseline of trust, then Vivian came in with the formal documentation and the practical detail. She was better at the practical. He was better at the first 10 minutes. He sat across from Theo's mother, Carla, in a coffee shop 2 blocks from the hospital because Carla had said she couldn't go back into that building unless she had to, and he understood that completely. She was 37 and looked older and was wearing a jacket that had a small stain on the left cuff that she had clearly not noticed, which meant she was the kind of tired where you stopped seeing yourself in the mirror properly. "How old is your son?" she asked him before he could say much of anything. 8, he said. "Healthy?" "Healthy. Has been for 2.5 years. "Surgery?" "Heart." She nodded slowly, looked at her coffee. "And you're here because someone helped you?" "Yes." "Why? I mean, why do you do this? Why not just be grateful and move on?" He thought about the monthly visits to the cemetery, the carnations, Milo's easy, "Hi, it's us again." "Because being the person on the other side of the table," he said, "is the best way I know how to say thank you to someone who can't hear me say it." Carla looked at him for a long moment. "Tell me about the fund," she said. Theo Barish's surgery was approved in 11 days. The turnaround record for the Next Chance Foundation, which Priya started tracking in a shared spreadsheet, was a source of quiet pride to everyone involved. Vivian presented this fact to her board at the 6-week operational review meeting, and then immediately said that she was not interested in celebrating it because an 11-day record meant there were cases that had taken longer, and she wanted to know why. The board member who had run the child welfare advocacy organization for 15 years looked at her over the conference table with an expression that said, "This is either going to be a very effective organization or a very exhausting one to be involved with, and possibly both." She was not wrong. Vivian was difficult in the specific way that people who care intensely about outcomes are difficult. She did not let things go. She did not accept "we're working on it" as a complete sentence. And she had a talent for identifying the place in any process where the thing that looked fine was quietly not fine. She also worked longer hours than anyone else on the project, which made it hard to argue with the intensity because she was not asking anyone to do something she wasn't doing herself. Landon watched this from the outside and from the inside simultaneously. Outside as an advisor who came in 2 or 3 times a week. Inside as someone who had started to understand the way she operated well enough to know when to push back and when to let her run. He pushed back on a Tuesday in the 7th week. They were at the Sterling house, the study, which had become the de facto working space because it was where the journals were, and where Vivian seemed to think most clearly, possibly because the room still smelled like Marcus, and working in it felt, to her, like something she owed him. The dead succulent had been replaced with a live one that Milo had picked out at a hardware store and presented to Vivian with the declaration that it was harder to kill than the other kind, which she had accepted with the gravity it deserved. Landon had reviewed the first operational report. He set it on the desk. "You're trying to do too many cases at once," he said. Vivian looked up from her laptop. "We have the funding to support the current caseload." "It's not about funding, it's about Priya. She's managing intake documentation, family communication, and coordination with the hospital contacts simultaneously, and she's doing all of it at a level of quality that will not be sustainable if you add the 3 cases you're proposing to add this month. I can take some of the coordination. You already work 16-hour days. I sleep fine. That's not the point." He sat down across from her. "You're building something meant to outlast you. You've said that. If you build it by running everyone at a pace that only works because they're personally committed to you, and this mission, you're not building an institution. You're building a cult of effort that collapses the moment anyone gets sick or burns out or leaves." She looked at him. "That's direct," she said. "You told me to be direct." "I know I did." She looked at the operational report. He could see her weighing it, the way she weighed things, genuinely, not for show, running the actual numbers against the actual capacity. "What's your recommendation?" "Hire a second intake coordinator, part-time to start. Someone Priya can train before you expand the caseload." He paused, and closed the laptop at 9 o'clock. "That's not a professional recommendation. It's a practical one." He looked at her. "You're not any good to anyone if you break down, and you're running close to the edge of what one person can hold right now." She was quiet. He watched her decide whether to deflect the personal part of it, which was what she usually did. Redirect to logistics, turn the human observation into a process question. She didn't this time. "I'm aware," she said. If I stop moving, I start thinking too much. And the things I think about when I stop moving are not productive." "Marcus," he said. "Among other things." He did not push further. He understood the particular shape of staying busy to stay ahead of grief, because he had spent the better part of Milo's first year after surgery doing exactly that, picking up extra shifts, studying for his certification late at night, filling every available minute with something purposeful, because the alternative was sitting with how close it had come. "Second intake coordinator," he said. Post the position this week." "Fine." She made a note. "I want to talk to you about something else." "Okay." She closed the laptop, which was unusual enough that he noticed. "The board has started asking about a public launch," she said. "A press event, announcing the foundation formally, telling the story." She folded her hands on the desk. "They want a face. Not me. I mean, I'll be there, but they want the human element. The story that explains why this exists. The Milo story." Landon went very still. "No," he said. "I'm not asking you to do it. I'm telling you what they've asked and asking what you think. I think Milo is 8 years old, and not a symbol. He's a kid. He didn't choose to be the reason this exists. He chose to have burritos instead of pizza and to tell you your house was clean. He doesn't get to consent to being the face of something at 8 years old." "I agree with you," Vivian said. He stopped. "I agree completely," she said. "I told the board the family story remains private. I'm not using Milo. I'm not using you. The story we tell publicly is Marcus's. The broad strokes, not the journals. Not anything private. A man who spent years quietly doing what this foundation now does formally. That's the narrative. She paused. But I wanted to tell you directly, rather than have you find out another way. He looked at her. Thank you, he said. You don't have to thank me for not doing something terrible. You'd be surprised how rare that is. She almost smiled, not quite. The press event is in 3 weeks. I'd like you to be there, not as a speaker, just as there. In case it goes sideways in some way I haven't anticipated, which with press events it always does. Sure, he said. I'll be there. Good. She reopened the laptop, then closed it again. One more thing. Yeah. She reached into the top drawer of the desk and placed a small envelope on the surface between them. He looked at it. His name was on the front in handwriting he didn't recognize. Not Marcus's cramped handwriting, not Vivian's clean architectural print. Different. This came in the mail yesterday, she said. Addressed to the foundation, care of this address, which is the only contact information we've made public so far. It was inside the outer envelope. The outer envelope had no return address. He picked up the inner envelope and opened it. Inside was a note card, handwritten, short. I read about the Next Chance Foundation in the business column last week. I don't have much, but I'm sending what I can. My son had leukemia when he was 5. He's 18 now, starting college in the fall. Someone helped us when we had nothing left. I've been trying to figure out how to pay it forward for 13 years. I think this is how. There was a check folded behind the note card. Landon unfolded it. $940. Made out to the Next Chance Foundation in careful, slightly shaky handwriting that suggested an older person or someone whose hands were not entirely steady. He looked at the check for a long moment. $940, he said. 13 years of someone trying to figure out how to pay it forward, Vivian said. He looked up at her. She was watching him. Her eyes were doing the thing they sometimes did, trying very hard to stay professional and not quite succeeding at the edges. I want to frame the note card, she said, not publicly, just in here. She glanced around the study. It doesn't seem anything, he said. Frame it. She nodded. He set the check back on the desk carefully, like it was worth more than the number on it, which in some way that had nothing to do with accounting, it was. But the press event was held at a hotel conference room downtown, medium-sized, nothing flashy. Vivian had been adamant about this. No gala, no dinner, no black tie, anything. A conference table, some chairs, a brief statement, and a Q&A. The kind of event that said, this is a working organization, not a brand launch. Landon stood at the back of the room with a cup of coffee and watched. Vivian was at the front, composed in the way she was always composed in public, and she told the story the way they had agreed to tell it. Marcus's years of private work, the gap in the system that he had identified, the foundation as the formal extension of what he had been doing quietly for 8 years. She did not mention Milo. She did not mention Landon. She mentioned Sonia Rayburn by name, with Sonia's permission, and Sonia, sitting in the third row, pressed her lips together in the way of someone trying not to cry in public, and managing it by about 60%. A reporter from the local business section asked about funding sources. Vivian said the foundation was currently donor-funded with plans to seek grant support in year 2. A reporter from the health desk asked about intake criteria. Vivian explained them clearly in under 90 seconds, which was impressive because the criteria were actually somewhat complex, and most people struggled with that kind of compression. A third reporter, freelance, Landon thought, based on the notepad rather than a recorder, asked a different kind of question. Why this? She said. You run a successful company. You have a full life. Plenty of people lose a spouse and find ways to honor their memory that don't involve building a nonprofit from scratch and running it at this level of involvement. Why not just write a check to an existing organization? The room was quiet. Vivian looked at the reporter for a moment. Because the existing organizations weren't fast enough, she said. And because my husband spent 8 years trying to compensate for that with his own money, one child at a time, without telling anyone. And he had an idea for something better, and he didn't get to build it. She paused. I'm building it because he didn't get the chance to, and because the families who need it in 6 weeks can't wait for me to finish grieving first. The room stayed quiet for a second. Then the moderator moved to the next question. Landon looked at his coffee cup. There was a woman 2 rows ahead of him, a small woman he didn't recognize, who had been sitting very still through the entire event. When Vivian said those last words, "The families who need it in 6 weeks can't wait for me to finish grieving first," the small woman exhaled slowly and looked at her lap, and Landon thought, she's here because she has a kid. She heard about this somewhere, and she came to see if it was real. He looked at her for a moment. Then he walked forward and sat in the empty seat beside her and said quietly, "Are you okay?" She looked at him. "Do you have a child who needs help?" he said. She was quiet for a moment, then softly, "My daughter. Cardiac condition. We don't know yet what. We're still in the diagnostic phase, but the cardiologist said it could require a specialist, and we don't have. We're not." She stopped. "After the event," Landon said, "come talk to me. Not to a form. To me. We'll figure out what the situation looks like and what we can do." She looked at him. The same look Renee Okafor had in that consultation room. The look of someone being asked to believe they can put something down. "Who are you?" she asked. He thought about the truck and the cracked dashboard and the carnations at a grocery store checkout lane and a cemetery on the east side with a rusted gate and a boy who talked to headstones like they were neighbors. "Someone who's been where you are," he said. He handed her one of the cards Priya had made, plain white, the foundation name, a phone number, an email. She took it with both hands. Kink. Vivian found him after, when the room had mostly cleared. "You were talking to someone," she said. "Possible case," he said, "but still diagnostic. I told her to call Priya." Vivian looked at the door through which the woman had left, then at Landon. "You walked up to a stranger in a press event," she said. She had the look. "The look. You'll recognize it eventually," he said. "It's the look of someone who came to find out whether this is real or just a nice idea." Vivian was quiet. "Is it?" she said. "Real?" He looked at her. "Amara Okafor's surgery is in 4 days," he said. "Theo Barish is already in physical therapy. The woman who sent $940 has a son starting college in the fall." He paused. "Yeah, it's real." She looked at the empty conference table, the chairs being stacked at the side, the ordinary aftermath of a thing that had started in a cemetery 2 months ago. "I keep thinking about the last journal entry," she said, "that he was going to come home the next day and talk to me, that he'd been working up to it." "I know. I keep thinking about how different it would have been," she said, "if he'd made it home." Landon looked at her. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe the thing that makes it real now is exactly that you had to find it yourself. That you went into that study and read all 8 years of it alone and decided it mattered." He paused. "That's not his foundation. It's yours. You built it from something he left behind, but you built it." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're annoyingly good at saying the right thing," she said. "I've been told I'm consistent," he said. She exhaled, the kind of exhale that releases something. "Go home," she said. "Milo's been with Elena for 5 hours. She's teaching him chess variations. He's fine. He beat her at the regular version twice. She's retaliating with the Sicilian defense." "That tracks," Landon said. They walked out of the empty conference room and into the hallway, and neither of them said anything else. And the silence between them was the kind that no longer needed to be filled. Amara Okafor came home from Boston on a Thursday. Renee sent Landon a photograph. Not staged, not posed, just a phone picture taken in the back seat of a car. Amara in a hospital-issue socks and her own pajamas with the small cartoon clouds on them, leaning her head against the window with her eyes half open and the particular boneless exhaustion of a child who has been through something large and is now, finally, on the other side of it. The light through the car window was the flat, pale light of a November afternoon, and Amara's hand was loosely holding her mother's, and that was all. Landon looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he forwarded it to Vivian. She replied in 4 minutes. Good, just that word. But he knew her well enough by now to know that a 4-minute reply from Vivian Sterling, who processed most things in under 90 seconds, meant she had sat with the photograph for 3.5 minutes before writing anything. He put his phone in his pocket and went to pick up Milo from school. And winter came to Millfield the way it always did. Suddenly, without much warning, the temperature dropping over a single weekend and the trees going bare almost overnight. The city got its gray sky face on, the one it wore from November through March, and people walked faster on the sidewalks, and the coffee shops got crowded in the afternoons. The Next Chance Foundation's caseload, which had been building steadily since the nonprofit filing, did not slow down for the weather. By the end of November, they had formally processed 14 cases. 11 had been funded. 2 were still in the approval window. 1 had been declined, a case where the diagnostic picture changed significantly between application and review, moving the required procedure into a category that Millfield General could handle within normal insurance parameters, which was the best possible reason to decline a case and the only kind Vivian had so far been willing to accept. Priya had hired a second intake coordinator. Her name was James, 26, recently out of a social work graduate program, and he had a talent for the family communication piece that surprised even Priya, who had not expected to be surprised by someone that young. He wrote intake letters that were clear and human, and contained 0 words that would have looked at home in a grant application. Landon read his first 3 letters and said to Vivian quietly that they didn't need to worry about that part anymore. She agreed. She also gave James a raise after his 4th week, which was not standard probationary policy. And when Priya pointed this out, Vivian said that standard probationary policy was designed to protect the organization from bad hires, and James was clearly not a bad hire, so the policy did not apply. Priya wrote this down as a precedent for her own reference and said nothing further. The board met in December for the first formal quarterly review. The financial picture was stable. Vivian had seeded the foundation's operating fund substantially from her own accounts, and the press event had generated a wave of smaller donations that Priya tracked in a spreadsheet she updated every Monday. The $940 donation had been followed by dozens more in similar ranges, amounts that said, "I don't have much, but I have this." There had also been 2 larger institutional donations, one from a regional hospital network that had read the business column piece and made an inquiry, and one from a small private foundation whose director had apparently known Marcus Sterling professionally, and upon reading about the Next Chance Foundation, had called Vivian's office and said, flatly, that he should have known Marcus was behind something like this. He wasn't behind it, Vivian had told him. He was beside it. I built it. The director had laughed and written a check and joined the board's advisory council. Landon was not at the quarterly board meeting. He was at Milo's school holiday concert, which Milo had been practicing for with the dedicated intensity he brought to things he was privately excited about but publicly pretended to be indifferent to. He played the recorder. He was, by any objective measure, mediocre at the recorder, but he played with great feeling. And when Landon sat in the 3rd row of the school gymnasium and watched his son stand in the 2nd row of the assembled class and put the instrument to his lips with the expression of a person about to perform surgery, something in Landon's chest did the thing it did sometimes. The thing that was too large and too ordinary to have a proper name. Just the feeling of a life that had been very close to being different. He texted Vivian a photo of Milo mid-performance. The expression on Milo's face was extraordinary. Eyebrows pulled together, eyes fixed forward, utterly committed. She replied, "He looks like he's defusing a bomb." Recorder concert, same stakes. How is he terrible, but very sincere about it? That's the important part. He put his phone away and watched the rest of the concert. January arrived, and with it the first anniversary of Vivian's reading the journals. She did not mark it as an occasion exactly. She was not the type to mark things with ceremony. But she went into the study on a Sunday evening and sat at the desk and opened the final journal to the last entry. The one she had read so many times she could have recited it, and read it once more. "I'm going to ask her tomorrow. Actually, ask her." She closed it. She had been thinking about a specific question for several weeks, turning it over and examining it the way you examine something you're not sure yet whether to keep. It was the kind of question that could disrupt a working arrangement that was, by any practical measure, functioning well. The kind that could make things complicated in ways that were hard to uncomplicate. She was also not, at 31, someone who had ever successfully talked herself out of asking a direct question by worrying about the disruption it would cause. She picked up her phone. "Are you free tomorrow evening?" Landon replied after a few minutes. "Milo's at his friend Derek's house for a sleepover." "So yes." Come for dinner, not a work meeting, just dinner. A longer pause this time. Okay. She put the phone down and looked at the framed note card on the wall. The $940 donor's note, which Elena had helped her frame and hang in the study 2 months ago. I've been trying to figure out how to pay it forward for 13 years. 13 years was a long time to carry something while waiting for the right place to put it down. Landon brought wine because it seemed like the right thing to bring to a dinner that had been explicitly designated as not a work meeting, and because Milo was not with him to have opinions about the selection. He stood at the front door and felt briefly, absurdly self-conscious in a way he had not felt since approximately his mid-20s, which he recognized as information about something and chose not to examine too carefully right now. Elena let him in and then, with the tact of someone who had read the room, said she was leaving for the evening and that dinner was in the oven and she'd set the table in the smaller dining room, not the formal one. The smaller dining room turned out to be a room off the kitchen that felt like it had been used. There were marks on the table, a slight unevenness to the chairs. The window had a smudge on the lower pane that suggested Milo had pressed his face against it at some point in the past several months. The table was set for 2 without any particular ceremony, just plates and glasses and the bottle opener left out for the wine. Vivian came in from the kitchen wearing something that was not a blazer, dark trousers, a simple gray top, and she looked, without the armor of professional context, like a version of herself that had been there all along but that Landon was seeing directly for the first time. You look different without a legal pad, he said. You look different without Milo, she said. I feel different without Milo. Quieter. Is that good or bad? Both, mostly good. He held up the wine. I didn't know what you liked. She looked at the bottle. That's fine. I don't drink much, but I'll have a glass. She took it from him and opened it with the efficiency of someone who approaches most physical tasks as problems to be solved rather than rituals to be performed. Poured 2 glasses. Handed one to him. They sat. She had made pasta. Not Elena's pasta. Something simpler, more utilitarian, clearly the result of someone who cooked infrequently and had chosen a recipe that had the fewest places to go wrong. It was slightly overcooked. She knew it was slightly overcooked. He could tell by the way she looked at it when she served it, a brief assessment followed by the decision to not comment. He did not comment either. He ate it. Marcus would have had opinions about this pasta, she said. Was he a good cook? No, but he had opinions anyway. She looked at her own plate. He would have told me the timing was off, and then offered to fix it next time. And then the next time he would have made something using 4 times as many ingredients and left the kitchen looking like a disaster area. A pause. And it would have been better than this. This is fine, Landon said. You're being polite. I'm being honest. It's fine. I've had worse pasta. I once made Milo pasta that was so overcooked he asked if it was soup. She almost laughed. What did you do? Added a spoon and called it soup. Did he eat it? He ate 2 bowls. Told me it was the best soup I'd ever made, which was technically true. She did laugh this time, small and real. And it was still the kind of laugh that seemed to surprise her slightly when it happened, like a door opening in a room she kept mostly closed. They ate for a few minutes without talking, which was comfortable in the way that silence between 2 people who have spent months working through difficult things together can be comfortable. No need to fill it, no discomfort in it. Then Vivian set her fork down. I want to ask you something, she said. Okay. And I want you to answer honestly, not in the way you think I want to be answered. I always answer honestly. You answer practically. It's not always the same thing. She looked at him. Over the past several months, working on this together, has any part of it felt like something more than a professional arrangement to you? The question sat between them, clear and unambiguous, in the way she did everything. Direct, no softening, no plausible deniability. Landon looked at his wine glass, then at her. Yes, he said. She nodded once, the way she nodded when she received information she'd already suspected but needed confirmed. For me also, she said. How long? A while. She picked up her fork again, then put it down. The night I called you about the Okafor family. When you said go home, close the laptop at 9. I realized I had been looking forward to those calls in a way that had nothing to do with the foundation. He was quiet for a moment. "Vivian," he said. "I know the complications," she said. "I'm not naive about them. You're a single father and your son comes first, which is as it should be. I've been widowed for less than 2 years, and that carries its own weight. We work together on something that matters to both of us, and disrupting that is a real risk." She said all of this evenly, systematically, the way she mapped failure modes before building anything. "I'm aware of all of it." "So am I," he said. "And?" He looked at her. At the woman who had confronted a stranger at a grave and demanded answers, and then gone home and read 8 years of her husband's private journals until 4 in the morning, and then called an estate lawyer and built a foundation in 4 weeks, and cried in a press conference in the particular way of someone who will not cry at a press conference, which meant tilting her chin up 1 degree and saying the true thing instead. "And I think," he said, "that the fact that you laid all of that out like a risk assessment is either the most romantic or least romantic thing I've ever heard, and I genuinely can't tell which." She stared at him. Then she laughed, fully this time, real and unguarded, the kind she'd been holding back, and it changed the room. "That's fair," she said. "I'm serious about the assessment being right, though," he said. "All of those complications are real. I know they are. Milo will have opinions." "Of course he will. He has opinions about red pepper flakes. He'll ask you 100 questions. I'll answer them." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not afraid of your son, Landon. He's the most straightforward person in this entire situation." He thought about Milo sitting on the armrest at their first visit. "You can pet the armrest if it bothers you. I'm not going to fall." Milo declaring that the dead succulent needed replacing. Milo saying, with the flat certainty of a child who had decided something, "She's lonely. People who have a lot going on in their life don't have houses that clean." "Yeah," Landon said. "He is." "So?" She looked at him. "I'm not suggesting we make any dramatic declaration. I'm suggesting we don't pretend the thing I just said isn't true, and we see what that looks like." "That," he said, "I can do." She picked up her fork again. He picked up his wine. The overcooked pasta sat between them on a table with a smudge on the window and imperfect chairs, and neither of them said anything else about it for a while, and the silence was the most comfortable it had ever been. Spring arrived in the particular way Millfield springs arrived. 1 warm week followed by a cold snap, and then warmth again, the trees making a second attempt at green. The cemetery on the corner of Prater Avenue and 6th got its annual cleanup from the city crew, who actually showed up this year, and the rusted iron gate got a coat of black paint that made it look, for a few weeks at least, like something that had been tended to. On the first Sunday of April, Landon pulled the truck into its usual spot on the street outside. Milo was already unbuckling before the engine was off. But this time, when he climbed out, there was a third door opening. Vivian stepped out of the passenger side, and she was carrying flowers. Not carnations, because she had asked Milo at the kitchen table the night before what they usually brought, and Milo had told her about the carnations from the checkout lane, and then had studied her for a moment and said that she could pick something else if she wanted, that the man in the grave wouldn't mind, which was both very Milo and probably true. She had chosen white tulips, a small bunch wrapped in the florist paper she had not bothered to remove, because it had not occurred to her to, and she was still learning the ways that grief could show up in small practical decisions. Milo had accepted this choice without comment, which, for Milo, was high praise. They walked through the gate together, the 3 of them. Milo ran slightly ahead, because he always ran slightly ahead on this path, and Landon walked in the middle, and Vivian walked beside him, close but not touching, because they were both still learning the choreography of this and had agreed, without saying it explicitly, to let Milo set the pace of things. The northeast corner, the ornamental hedge, the dark gray granite, the clean carved letters. Marcus Sterling, 1979 to 2022. Husband, builder, dreamer. Milo crouched down and placed his flowers. White carnations, because he had wanted to bring the usual thing, and that was his choice, against the base of the stone. He was quiet for a moment in the way he was always quiet for a moment. "Hi," he said. "It's us again, except there's 3 of us now." He said it exactly the same way he said everything else at this grave. Easy, direct, no performance. just information offered plainly. Then he looked up at Vivian, who was standing a step back, still holding her tulips. "You can put them down," he said. "There's room." She stepped forward and crouched beside him and placed the white tulips next to the carnations. She stayed crouched for a moment, which was longer than she usually allowed herself to be in close proximity to anything that made her feel uncertain, and she looked at the headstone. She had looked at this stone in photographs, the cemetery's public records, visible online, and she had looked at it in her memory, standing here 2 months after Marcus died, alone, in January, when the ground was cold and she had lasted approximately 4 minutes before getting back in the car. She had not come back after that. She had not been able to. She was here now. "I read everything," she said quietly, not performing it for Landon or Milo, just saying it. "All 8 years. I know what you were doing." She paused. "I know what you were going to ask me." She stopped. "I would have said yes. I want you to know that." She stood back up. Milo was looking at her, not in the probing, relentless way he looked at math problems, but in the softer way he looked at things he had decided he understood. "Did you know him?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Not as well as I thought I did. Better than I knew when he was alive." Milo considered this. "That's kind of backwards," he said. "Yes," she said. "It is." He nodded, filing this information somewhere internal. Then he turned back to the headstone and resumed his usual proceedings. "So the foundation is doing well," he informed the grave. "I know because I hear about it a lot. Like, a lot, a lot. Dad talks about it at dinner, which used to be when I could talk about whatever I wanted, but now I have to wait for a gap." He glanced back at his father. "I'm not complaining. It's a good thing to talk about." Landon looked at the sky briefly. "We helped 31 kids," Milo continued. "I know because Vivian showed me the number on the spreadsheet. She has a lot of spreadsheets." He paused, reflective. "Also, she's pretty good at chess, which I did not expect. I've beaten her 6 times, but she's beaten me 11, so I'm still working on it." Vivian folded her hands and said nothing, but her face was doing something she was not entirely in control of. "And Dad is doing okay," Milo said. "He's better than he was. He used to have this look sometimes, like he was carrying something really heavy and didn't want anyone to notice. He doesn't have that look as much anymore." He stood up, brushing gravel from the knee of his jeans. "I think things are going in the right direction." He said this with the finality of someone delivering a brief to stakeholders. Then he stepped back and stood between his father and Vivian, and the 3 of them stood there in the April light, in the northeast corner of a cemetery that was not a beautiful cemetery, in front of a headstone for a man who had spent 8 years deciding quietly that other people's children deserved a chance. Landon thought about something Milo had said a year ago, driving away from the Sterling house for the first time. It would be a waste to find all that out and just be sad about it. 8 years old and already understanding the thing that took most adults a lifetime to get to, which was that grief was not a destination, it was a passage, and what mattered was what you built on the other side. He looked at Vivian. She was looking at the headstone, and her expression was not the carefully managed professional composure she wore when she needed to hold something at arm's length. It was the face of someone who had set something down, not put it away, not stopped caring, just stopped holding it up by sheer will as if it might disappear if she let it rest. There was grief in it, and there was also something else. Something that had not been there when she confronted a stranger at this grave 14 months ago. Something that looked, imperfectly and incompletely, like peace. She felt him looking and turned. She didn't say anything. He didn't either. Some things didn't require filling. The Next Chance Foundation's first annual report, published in March of the following year, documented 39 funded cases across a 12-month operational period, 14 counties, 3 states. Children who had been through procedures that ranged from cardiac surgery to bone tumor removal to a kidney transplant, whose family had been 3 weeks from the window closing. The average time from intake to funding decision was 9 days, 3 days ahead of the 2-week commitment, which Priya reported to the board with visible satisfaction. The report did not include names, by design. No family spotlighted, no child held up as a symbol of what the foundation had accomplished. Just numbers and outcomes, and at the back, One page of text that Vivian had written herself and rewritten 6 times before she was satisfied with it. It read in part, "This foundation exists because one man spent 8 years solving a problem he didn't have to solve, one family at a time, without telling anyone. He understood something that we are still learning to put into practice, that the most important kind of help arrives before the person needs to ask for it, before they know who to ask, before the window has closed. He called it basic decency. We are trying to call it policy. 39 children received procedures in the past 12 months that they could not otherwise have accessed in time. 39 families did not have to choose between the impossible and the unbearable. That is what we built this year. Next year, we intend to do more." Landon read the report at his kitchen table while Milo ate cereal across from him and read something on his tablet. The apartment was the same apartment. Same crack in the dashboard of the truck outside, same elevator that worked 60% of the time, same cabinet in the corner with things inside that had been there for 5 years. He had not moved what was in that cabinet yet, but he was starting to think about it. Starting to think that clearing space was not the same as erasing something, that a cabinet could hold new things without the old ones needing to be destroyed. He thought about what 39 meant, not as a statistic, as 39 specific mornings when a parent's phone had rung and someone on the other end had said, "Your child's surgery is covered." 39 specific moments of a weight lifting. Some of them he had been present for, sitting across the table in a coffee shop or a hospital consultation room, watching the expression change. Some of them he had only heard about secondhand, through Priya's careful notes or Sonia's occasional updates. Each one had the same shape as the call he had received 2.5 years ago from Millfield General's billing department, the call that had sent him to a hospital bathroom to cry for 15 minutes, and then to his son's bedside to hold a small hand. He thought about Marcus Sterling, who had made calls like that 30-some times from a private account in an anonymous name and logged everyone in a green journal and never told a soul. There was a lesson in that somewhere, not a tidy one. Life didn't hand out tidy lessons. It handed out complicated situations and let you find the lesson on your own or not. But he thought the lesson was something like this. The things that matter most are rarely the things that announce themselves. They are quiet. They are consistent. They are a man writing in a journal at midnight, a parent on a phone at 6:23 in the morning, sending a photograph of a child with cloud-patterned pajamas asleep against a car window, a $940 check from someone who had been waiting 13 years for the right place to put something down. They are a boy talking to a headstone like a neighbor. They are the moment when you stop asking who is obligated to help and start asking who you're going to be when no one is watching. Milo looked up from his tablet. "Is the report good?" he asked. "Yeah," Landon said. "It's good." Milo looked at it. "How many kids this year?" 39? Milo did the mental math. Landon could see him doing it, the small computation of what 39 meant relative to the 60 to 80 per year that was the estimated county need, and then the larger computation of what year 2 might look like if the trajectory held. "We need more," Milo said. "I know. You're working on it?" "We're working on it." Milo nodded, satisfied, then went back to his tablet. Landon looked at the annual report in his hands, at Vivian's words on the back page, at the number 39 printed in a clean, plain font on the summary page, which did not and could not capture what it actually meant, which was 39 children who were somewhere this morning doing ordinary things, eating cereal, arguing about personal space on gravel paths, playing chess, telling their fathers they looked like they were defusing bombs, because someone had decided that ordinary mornings were worth fighting for. His phone buzzed. A message from Vivian. Board approved the Year 2 expansion, 2 additional counties. James is handling intake training for the new hospital contacts. Priya wants to discuss the revised timeline. Are you free Thursday? He almost replied with yes and a time. Instead, he wrote, Thursday, yes, but closed the laptop at 9. A pause. Then, I'll try. Try harder. Longer pause. Then finally, fine. He smiled at his phone, put it face down on the table, picked up his coffee, which was, predictably, cold. Milo looked over. Is that Vivian? Yes. Is she coming Sunday? I think so. Milo returned to his tablet with the expression of someone who has already accounted for this in their plans and found it acceptable. Tell her I've been studying the Sicilian defense. She'll be thrilled. She should be. She invented it. She didn't invent it. It's a chess opening. She acts like she invented it, Milo said, which was fair enough. Landon drank his cold coffee and looked at the annual report one more time, at the number 39, and then at the window, and at the ordinary street outside doing its ordinary morning thing, completely indifferent to the weight of what was happening inside the people walking through it. He thought about Marcus Sterling writing at 11:47 at night. I'm going to ask her tomorrow. He thought about how a single sentence written the night before a person dies can contain more hope than a document full of plans, because it is pointed not backward at what has been built, but forward at what is still possible. That was the thing about kindness done quietly, in the dark, without an audience. It did not end when the person ended. It moved forward through the people it had touched, into the children they raised, into the organizations they built, into the strangers they sat next to in hotel conference rooms and asked, "Are you okay? Do you have a child who needs help? Come talk to me." Not to a form, to me. It moved forward the way water moves through stone, not fast, not dramatic, not announced, just steady, just constant, just patient enough to outlast the hardness of the world, one small persistent act at a time. Marcus Sterling had understood this. He had just not known that someone else would be the one to carry it. Outside, the street was doing what streets did. The coffee was cold. Milo was reading something that was probably not homework. In a gray stone house across the city, Vivian Sterling was already at her desk, probably with the laptop open, probably with the legal pad beside it, building something that would still be standing long after any of them were gone. Landon Hayes sat at his kitchen table in a studio apartment on the east side of Millfield and understood, with the full weight of everything that had led him here, that gratitude this size was not a feeling you held. It was a thing you did, every day, for as long as you were able. That was all. That was enough.